I was very interested in the different perspectives the four speakers took. I'm particularly interested in the book which Ian McCormick sent me, which is Tomás O'Neill's book, the translation of, from Irish, of the book of James Fintan Lalor. And I read it with huge interest. What struck me deeply was the clarity of thought that James Fintan Lalor had, and the clarity of expression which he put into the many articles he wrote for Freeman's Journal and the Felon and other articles, and that honesty which permeated everything he did. And that was absolutely wonderful. I thought I was going to be bored reading when it excuse me, when it got into all of the documents, but no, one is as enthralling as the next. Now, I was very struck by Charlie Flanagan, when he's a person I would regard as a friend, a Midland friend in political life, and one person that I've always liked. Now, he spoke about, he worries about the cynicism, I think, in which politicians can come to be held, and yet at a local level where the TD is the politician, he not only is admired and liked, often makes friends, and that there's a great trust between the voter and the person who's going forward for election. And that resonated very much with me, because just for 1 year short of 30 years, I was the lucky and fortunate recipient of that trust in the constituency of Longford Westmeath. And I know exactly what Charlie is talking about. There is at a national level a cynicism with politics, but when that's translated into the local TD in his or her bailiwick, that is translated into trust and liking. And I've always thought that, I think, when you go to a person's door and you say, I am such a person, I'm representing such a party, and I'm seeking for your vote, there is established a repeat mechanism of trust between the voter and the supplicant or the applicant for the votes. And I think that's extraordinarily strong in Irish political life ever since even in a limited franchise came up. And of course it goes back to Roman times as well, when the people the tribunes ruled and when the people listened to them. But it struck me that when you look at posters today which advocate, and I won't dwell on it, Chairman, which advocate that we get rid of politicians on a poster by a political party, I thought that was crude and crass from one political party to the general population. One of the points of getting rid of an institution, a constitutional institution of this state, was to get rid of politicians. And yet that was one political party. And do they ever think that if you kept at that and the circle came in and came in and came in? Democracy is very fragile, but it is very precious. Equally, trust is very fragile and is very precious. And I would be always one that would have stood up for that interaction between the local politician, the TD politician in his constituency. And that other declaration of get rid of politicians strikes me with a crudity which I found very hard to both read and think about. Now, we are talking about now, and I am very aware of the dismal situation in which we found ourselves and have found ourselves for the last number of years, and indeed of those who have been deeply, deeply hurt and had their whole being and their methods of living altered so much by the financial crisis. But I thought I would just say two things on that today. Yes, of course it's dreadful, and of course during the years of the construction boom, when everyone had jobs, but when the government of the day, and that was a Fianna Fáil government, relied too heavily on the outflow of taxes from construction. That's where the big fault lay, that we relied to the importunings of very good causes, the roads we drive on, the widows, the single mothers, all of the social good which lots of that money was put to. But an over-reliance, a ridiculous reliance on the taxes of what was, ever going to be a transient phenomenon, and it was that. And secondly, as has been mentioned, I think by Mr. Funnelly, the reliance on loose standards of regulation, a regulator who didn't regulate, a central bank which didn't do central bank business, and other disparities in that period. I know all of that, and I own up to all of that. I was not in government I was a backbencher and loved being a backbencher, because you could say what you wanted to say rather than what you were told to say. And often when I had got my speaking start when I was a backbencher, and the girl in the whip's office would say, "Are you going to talk to the topic?" I'd say, "Oh yeah, sure I am. And I would go in, and then I could actually say what I wanted to say. And that's a marvellous feeling of empowerment. But the government came in now, and fair dues to them. They have stuck to this programme. It's called the National Recovery Plan, 2011 to 2014. They have stuck, and I spent last night reading it, and they've stuck to it line by line. So what afflicts me with a huge sense of malaise is that when you listen to your TV at night, except for Vincent Browne, who's extraordinarily honest, no matter that we're all terrified of him, he is at the same time extraordinarily honest. When we listen to politicians now of the present day, and they say it's all Fianna Fáil's fault, but they neglect to say that they are actually following that programme line for line, and that which is entitled 2011 and to 2014, and which was compiled and issued and spoken about in the Dáil by the late Brian Lenihan. So they want to go to Europe, and the good people of Europe, Angela Merkel, who faces her own Holocaust tomorrow, well, I hope she will get back, because she's a very fine politician. But they say Europe loves us, and they give them pats on the back, and everyone comes home gleeful, because Europe is in belief of what the Irish government is doing. And yet, when the same politicians speak here, they give out to Fianna Fáil, they cast derision on them, they practically disenfranchise them. So nobody has caught into account the dichotomy between the two views, the views Thrasna na Dulta and the views here in Ireland. And I think it's amazing. And one other part of that I wanted to really lay to rest. Frequently you hear, excuse me, no, I get myself. I said I wouldn't get enraged, and I'm gradually getting enraged. And that is, but anyway.
You have to get enraged now in 1 minute.
1 minute left to be enraged. Thank you. Is the fact that we are constantly told again from the radios and TVs that that they have restored trust in Europe in Irish politicians, that Europe say to them now, you're all doing your job and we're very pleased with you, and they keep saying the other lot didn't turn up. Now that's not true. I went to Europe and I looked at the meetings at which my nephew Brian Lenihan attended. I looked at the attendance rate. He missed one meeting of the finance ministers, and all the officials and all of those who dealt with them spoke very highly, not only of him, but of other politicians as well. So saying that they didn't go to Europe is a complete fabrication. And I'm very glad to stand here today in a neighbouring constituency and to say that. But I do think, and I say it as a rider, I do think that the present government is doing well. It's sticking to the National Recovery Plan of 2011 to 2014, and I believe that the end is in sight. And thank you for listening to me.